What is going on, Trash Talkers? We are back with another episode for you. Today we are going to break down everything that took place at UFC 251, including Max Holloway being robbed of the title and the Usman-Masvidal fight, whether it lived up to the hype or not. Next, Washington owner Daniel Snyder has officially announced that the Redskins franchise will be retired and will be renamed prior to this new season starting. We're going to go over what names that they should start thinking about and what we believe would fit best for the Washington franchise. Finally, the NBA season is right around the corner, and the Lakers have found themselves in a precarious situation with both starting guards, Avery Bradley and Rajon Rondo, not being able to go. We're going to debate whether or not the Lakers should still be considered favorites to move forward in the West. All that and much more coming your way right now. All right, Nick, how was your week? How was your weekend? How was UFC 251?
Hey, for me, 251 lived up to the hype. And
Sure.
we'll get into that in a sec, but I love UFC 251. I thought it was great. You know, it definitely was one to remember, whether you like it or not. But we'll get into that. I'm excited to get right into that because I'm ready to quiet the haters. All right, I'm done with all the BS that people are talking about on the internet. This was just it's appalling to see people bash fighters who are in a cage, fighting for their lives, and well, let's just get into it. Let's break it down. But I think we should just start off with the beginning of the main event card. Amanda Ribas versus Paige Van Zandt. You know that armbar. That was quick. 2 minutes.
That was
21
insane.
seconds.
Was it 221?
221. Yeah.
221.
Amanda Ribas, she really just came onto the scene. She is definitely going to be something special in the UFC. And she said after her fight that she's more of a strawweight, so she's going to be fighting against Rose Namajunas, Jessica Andrade, Weili Zhang. You know, she's gonna put on some shows. The strawweight division and the women's strawweight division is really going to be great. So that's something to look out for. But she absolutely obliterated Paige Van Zandt, just completely controlled her.
For sure. I honestly, going into that fight, I didn't know much about Amanda Ribas.
No.
Honestly, I didn't even know how to say her name properly. So, I mean, that should tell you everything you need to know. But she showed me. She woke us up. She woke up the world. I mean, if you're going to do it, what better stage to do it on Fight Island on the main card when all eyes are watching, no other sports are happening. You are everything that everybody's fixating on, and this is the time to make your noise, make your name. And I think she did exactly what she needed to do. I mean, not for anything, they're completely separate people, but I saw little flashes of who's the woman who went into WWE? I keep forgetting.
Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, Ronda Rousey. I mean, just the way she was able to finish the fight on her terms and just absolutely dominate from start to finish.
Oh yeah,
there is literally nothing that Paige Van Zandt could have done in that fight. She couldn't have prepared for exactly what happened. It almost and here's another thing. It looked like what Conor McGregor did to Cowboy Cerrone when they fought earlier in the year. You know, where he just absolutely came out and just dominated. He had his plan. He executed it to perfection. Amanda Ribas did the same thing. She had her plan. She executed to perfection. And there's nothing else that really can be said about that fight. She had Paige Van Zandt down in 221 in that armbar, and that's just incredible.
Yeah, she's clearly way above Paige Van Zandt. And this was a huge statement because Paige Van Zandt leading up to it was saying, hey, I'm going to test free agency no matter what happens. And so, this is a huge fight for her. She really had to win if she wanted to have a true market moving forward.
Right
now, Paige Van Zandt, who really wants to sign her? It seems like there's a lot of bad blood between her and Dana White right now because of all the stuff she's been saying. And Amanda Ribas came right in and did what she needed to do. She proved that she is so much better than this mediocre competition that we like to call Paige Van Zandt. So I think that we really need to be looking out for Amanda Ribas. She didn't take any damage, so she's going to be back in the octagon in a few months.
Right.
And I think she's going to be like Petr Yan, where she's just going to rise up the ranks really quickly. I think she's going to be in those championship fights in the next year or year and a half. So
For sure.
I'm really looking forward to that.
100%. And I mean that got everybody hyped up. I mean that was the beginning of the night. That
Oh
was
yeah.
the absolute first fight. And I mean, what better to go from a 2 minute and 21 second fight of Amanda Hebos to the basically the one of the fights that everybody was anticipating for a while, Rose Namajunas versus Jessica Andrade. And I mean that fight lived up to its name as well. I mean that fight went the distance.
Mm-hmm.
They both fighters put everything they had out on the line, and there was nothing more that we as fans could have asked for from that specific fight, because it was a basic street brawl. I mean, they put every physical ounce of their bodies out on the line, and they were able, like, you talk about how Amanda Hebos didn't take any damage. Both those fighters, I mean, they're going to be sitting pretty for a little bit because they need to rest up for sure. But
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
Rose Namajunas, I mean, coming out on top was an absolute. I agreed with the judges scoring, and I was very happy to see her win. I thought she won the fight, and overall, I think it was a great showing for the women's division all around.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a close fight, and I mean, I believe it was a split decision. So it was a true battle between these two strikers, and Rose Namajunas, I think, has the edge on Jessica Andrade when it comes to grappling. We saw that in the first fight with them last year, but with the coronavirus, Rose Namajunas couldn't be in her gym in Colorado training with Trevor Whitman. So her and her fiance, Pat Barry, who's one of the best kickboxers of all time, they went back home to Minnesota and they just worked together. And she worked on her kickboxing, and that came in handy. That's exactly what she did. That was the entire game plan, was to stand up and fight. And it was there really was no grappling. There was no ground and pound, and all that work that she put in after a 14-month layoff. She looked great after the first 5 minutes. There was a little ring rust that she had to knock off in the first round, but she looked back to form in the second round, and that's when she really kicked in. And I think she really took over in the second and third round. That's really what helped her. And she just now we're tied up. We got a 1-1 in this fight between Andrade and Namajunas. I would love to see this happen again. Get a trilogy fight in here, and hopefully by the time that happens, we'll see one of these ladies having the belt around their waist, so it'll be even higher stakes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you couldn't ask for two different of people to be able to fight in the same division or in the same weight class. I mean, you think about it. Jessica Andrade, she was down 5 inches, and she was much stockier build, and she's got a lower center of gravity, and you look at just her physique. She's got a very strong base to her, and Rose Namajunas she's very tall, she's very lanky. That's why the grappling works for her, because she's so tall for that division. Now that she has that in her arsenal, I think that makes her 10 times as more lethal as she was heading into this fight. As she continues to work on the kickboxing, continues to working on the hand-to-hand combat, I think she's going to be a force to be reckoned with throughout the strawweight division.
Absolutely, yeah. This is great for the strawweight division. I think this now becomes, with Amanda Hebos here and Rose back, I think the strawweight division becomes the strongest women's weight class in the UFC. And I really can't wait to see what else, who else comes into this. I think this is great, especially now when all the focus is on these events, these UFC events. I think this is great for young up and coming women who want to get into the sport. You don't even have to be young. There's a lot of people coming into the sport in their 30s and succeeding. So all these people that are watching the sport, it's going to get more attention from women in all sports, and get their attention. I think it's just going to propel the sport even more in the coming years. So that's great for the sport. It's great for the women's division. this is overall just a fantastic fight, and it was fight of the night. It lived up to it. We saw the battle scars on Rose Namajunas.
That was quite the shiner she was rocking under her eye.
Shiner, the broken nose. It was she definitely got her war scars. But she got the win, and it was great. But I think another huge fight was right after that, Petr Yan versus Jose Aldo. That was pretty huge. This is a big fight for Petr because he's little less than 2 years into the UFC, and he's already fighting for the belt. And there's a lot of criticism because the UFC is just promoting him left and right. But we saw in this fight, I think, that he deserved to be there. He went up against one of the best featherweights of all time, and Jose Aldo, who said he feels even better at bantamweight than he ever did at featherweight. And we saw the Jose Evolve who used his leg kicks to help him, which is his trademark. That's how he became so successful, is with those leg kicks. And Petr Yan was able to counter them. He was able to just handle them perfectly. And then we saw in that 5th round, he absolutely came alive and just just went after Jose Aldo, got him down on the ground, and then the beatdown ensued after what looked to be a shattered nose. But I think the true story that needs to come out of this is the referees need to act a lot quicker in those situations. When a fighter is not intelligently defending themselves, you need to get in there and save them from themselves. Jose Aldo is not a guy who's going to tap. He's not going to give up. He's going to just ride it out. And you have to, as the ref, you need to be there for him when he's not there for himself. And so
100%. 100%.
That fight could have been stopped 30 seconds earlier, and the ref, Jose would make a flinch and he would reset his clock, and it was just poor judgment. I just don't want to see that happen, especially to a guy like Jose Aldo, who he's only 33 years old, but he's got a lot of damage that he's taken over his career. He's been in the sport for over a decade, and he's it wears on you. He may be 33, but he's got the body of a 55-year-old.
Right.
It takes a lot of damage on you, and I think he's at the point where it's tough for him to keep up with the younger guys. Not saying he can't win the belt any longer, but he's got to reevaluate, and I think this is going to be a little bit of a wake-up call for him, since he lost his last 2 fights in featherweight division, came over to bantamweight, just lost against Marlon Moraes, and now he lost to Petr Yan. So it's kind of a wake-up call for him, and we'll have to see what happens with Jose Aldo, but hats off to Petr Yan. I think he is the face of the division for now. He's got a lot of competition ahead of him because the bantamweight class is one of the most stacked divisions in the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep it brief because I think you talked in detail, but Petr Yan is somebody that everybody needs to pay attention to, and obviously this was a title fight because we're missing who the actual champion is, and I would like to see Henry Cejudo versus Petr Yan at some point. I think that would be an incredible fight, and
you might get it because right after the fight, Henry Cejudo was on Twitter calling out Petr Yan, saying, you're trash. I could beat you. You're gonna bend the knee to the Triple C. He's doing his marketing, his promotions.
But that all comes down to Dana White being able to pay somebody that's in the bantamweight class. Right. I mean, you talk about some of these things that are happening with the smaller guys. It's tough for the UFC, and if you look back at their track record, Dana White has notoriously not paid attention to the smaller guys, and I think that's why we find ourselves not really understanding or knowing who everyone is in those divisions, and I think at this point we've had our wake-up calls. Henry Cejudo knocked our blocks off and showed us exactly what he's able to do in that division. Now you have Petr Yan, who is 15-1 in his entire MMA career, 2 years into his UFC time. Just took down Jose Aldo. I think at this point, you need to create at least at minimum a co-main event for these two to fight for the title. Cejudo, who gave up the title to retire, I believe as something to do with the fact that he wants more money from Dana and from UFC. But he also seemed to be pretty happy with his retirement. So if this is something he wants to do, then it might not be a title fight. I don't know. I think Dana has to really put some thought into the fact that he might want to keep Cejudo around to keep maybe a possible trilogy fight between these two, because that would be an incredible series to watch over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite stunning to think that Henry Cejudo to Dana White is not a marketable guy. This is a guy who talks a lot of crap all the time. He gets in your face. He'll say what he has to, and I just don't understand what else a guy needs to do to be marketable. So
he's just standing there like this. Like, I mean, the man he's ready. He wants to be the face of the division, and he just needs Dana White to believe in him.
He's one of the best pound for pound fighters in the UFC, and a lot of people realize that, but for some reason they don't think that the casual fans are going to buy pay-per-views to watch him, which is just completely ridiculous because he is one of the most exciting fighters there is. And him against Petr Yan would just be an absolute show to watch. I think that could be fight of the year, no matter what year it is, no matter what else happens. Those two are just going to put on an absolute show, and I would love to watch them go 5 rounds.
Yeah, I think that'd be an incredible fight, and I think Dana realizes that if he can try to sculpt more people into this division and start making a name for it, I think that there's a chance that Henry Cejudo becomes a much more marketable asset to the UFC at that point in time, because then not only does he have the name recognition, but so do his counterparts that he'll be fighting against. And I think that is a main goal for the UFC, is that not only is the champion somebody that everybody knows, but who they're fighting needs to be known as well. I think this is the time that Dana needs to focus on those people, the Yans of the world, if you will, to bring them up to speed, up to snuff, and then watch Cejudo take care of his business. And who knows, I mean, the victory is not guaranteed to him, so he could lose, and then then we really have to start paying attention to Yan at that point. But that's a conversation for another time. I think that what Yan was able to do with the TKO on Jose Aldo was just it was eye-opening for sure, because I haven't seen Yan fight. This was my first introduction to him. I think it's most people's introduction to Petr Yan, and he caught my attention for sure.
Absolutely. Now the fight after this, the co-main event, Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway. This was interesting, to say the least. This was by far the most controversial fight of the night. And it's still a huge debate, a few days later. And, I'll let you give your take first. What did you think of Volkanovski getting the split decision win to retain the belt over Max Holloway?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty simple in my eyes. The fight was an absolute back and forth brawl between the two. I mean, they gave everything that they had. Those two, both Volkanovski and Holloway, are incredible fighters. They did everything that they set out to do, and they both did it to the best of their ability, which is why there was so much controversy, because both of them, nobody went down. Nobody was, giving an inch, if you will, right? Nobody was giving up any space to the other. I think here are the two things that stand out in my mind. Volkanovski took Holloway to the mat 3 different times. Holloway took him down 0 times. Okay. And then I think that when you are in a championship fight, you have to show, if it's going to come down to the scoring and the decision, I think you have to show the judges exactly that you are worth the handoff. You are worth them deciding that Volkanovski in this case is no longer worthy of the championship, and that you are now going to be recognized as the champion. And if they're tied at this point, you have to give it to the champion. The championship scoring is completely different than every other UFC fight, because when you have a championship on the line, you have to make sure that that champion can actually represent the division and represent in the fight. If they handed off the belt to Holloway in his next fight, he gets obliterated by somebody else. How does that look for the decision? How does that look for the UFC and the division itself? It just looks terrible. But if Volkanovski held on to this and he's able to, even if he loses, then he was able to successfully defend his title and has proven his worth. So I think from the UFC standpoint, they needed to make Volkanovski the winner. And Holloway, at this point, he just didn't show us enough that he should have gotten the scoring ahead of Volkanovski.
Well, I mean, I just want to start off by saying if Max Holloway won, he's not getting obliterated by anybody. He's the consensus greatest featherweight of all time. This guy is an absolute stud. He's been in 8 championship fights and won just about all of them. He's just had a little bit of trouble with Volkanovski, and the 2 fights they've had have been decisions, and the last one being a split decision. And it came down to hairs. It was razor thin. But going back to the beginning of the fight, Max didn't get any takedowns, but he got 2 knockdowns, which are huge. He got the leg kick to the head, and in the first round that dropped Volkanovski, and then he got the combination in the second round that dropped him again. And those are huge takedowns, and no one's really criticizing that. Holloway, he clearly won the first 2 rounds, and then on the flip side, Volkanovski took over in the championship rounds and won rounds 4 and 5. And the real, question is who won round 3. And if you look at it, Max Holloway, he outperformed him in total strikes. He had the higher amount of significant strikes. When a lot of judges look at the fight and who won, they're really looking at the numbers. They're looking at what happened. And Max Holloway, he had the numbers in his favor. He controlled the ring. What else? He didn't get taken down in the 3rd round. I don't know. Yeah, Volkanovski landed a few shots, but Max landed his shots as well. You have to take that into consideration. It gets to a numbers game, and you really have to Max Holloway, I don't know what else he could have done besides get a takedown. A takedown probably would have solidified him winning the 3rd round. But I think that he did show enough to get the win in the 3rd round and get the overall 3-2 victory.
I disagree. If you're letting it go to a judge's decision, you have to show them that you are worthy of them giving you more points to take over the championship.
The judges they're not looking at a championship. It's just a straight up fight.
That's not true.
You do not judge things differently because they're a championship fight. There are set rules in place. You need to follow the rules. There's no bias in this. You look at the rules and you follow them and you judge accordingly. These judges need to have more of a background in MMA. They need to understand what they're judging. You can't just be some Joe Schmo taken off the street just because you know somebody and you're given the chance to judge a championship fight on the biggest stage. That's not how this works. You need to understand what's going on, and if they really knew what they were doing, they would have seen that Max Holloway won that round.
For me, it wasn't about the round by round. I mean, you can say he won the round, but in overall points, when you're talking about,
well, that's really what matters is the 3rd round. It was 2.
No, that's in your opinion, right? You're talking about
Holloway
your
clearly
opinion.
Won the first 2, and Volkanovski won the last 2.
But again, that's your opinion. You're not a judge. You weren't there scoring it. They are scoring based on certain things. So what then you deduct...
Okay, then let's go look at all the other UFC fighters who were teeing off on Twitter saying that Max Holloway won that fight. All of them who are professional fighters who know what they're judging. Just 99% of them said that Max won that fight.
right? And I sat there as right after it finished, and I said Volkanovski won that fight. He didn't like because Holloway showed no. He showed nothing to me that said by going to decision he should have won that fight. That like he needed to do something that truly like put him ahead of Volkanovski. If you're putting them on the same, say they're tied, the upper hand just goes to Volkanovski at that point because he already has the title. That is how fighting and all sports basically go. If you're tied with someone, whoever had the upper hand coming in is going to get the benefit of the doubt, and that was Volkanovski coming in with the title.
Yeah, I think that's where the difference is. You think it was a tie. I think Max clearly came out on top in the third round. He had the numbers. He had the ring controlled. He did what he had to do to win that round, and everybody, just about everybody, saw that except for these two judges that wanted to rule in Volkanovski's favor.
And you're talking about 2 out of 3. I mean that's you're not just saying just two judges. It's 2 out of a possible 3. So only one judge saw it as you did, and that's why Volkanovski is retaining the
And
title.
that's why I'm saying that these judges need to have better credentials than oh, you judged a boxing fight, or you used to do amateur wrestling back in the day. That doesn't qualify you. You need you know fighters. You need someone who's been in the sport, who knows what they're looking at, and knows how to judge this properly. You can't. 3 judges is not enough to properly decide who's winning a fight. That's just there's a lot of room for error, and we've seen that a lot in the recently. So I think that this is just another case of that, and the UFC has a real issue that they need to work out. Yeah.
I mean that's a possibility, and maybe Dana White takes it under consideration, seeing what he saw. But I'm telling you right now, I sat there on Saturday night or Sunday morning when it finished, and I said to myself, Volkanovski retained the title. There wasn't a doubt in my mind because the way I scored it in my head was that they were tied, they were even. There was no give and take. There was just nothing that projected Holloway over Volkanovski. And even if I go back and look at it again, I'm sure I'll come to the same result. That's just me. But at this point, I think that the main takeaway and the thing that'll cheer everyone up is that we'll get to see a third fight.
I don't think so.
I think we will. I think we will because they both went to split decision, and
Well,
I mean
the first one was unanimous.
or okay, they both went to decision. Period. The fact remains that uh, Holloway is going to want a rematch at some point, and it was very entertaining. No matter how controversial the ending was, you can't tell me that the fight wasn't as entertaining as it was set out to be. And at that point, there's no reason that Dana White shouldn't want to try to get another fight in there because at this point, I mean, who's Volkanovski's number one contender outside of Holloway at this point?
To me personally, the featherweight division is the most stacked division in the UFC. Dana White wants to keep saying the bantamweight division is. There's so much more talent in the featherweight division, and we're about to get another fight tomorrow night, Calvin Kattar versus Dan Ige. That is going to be, I think, could be the fight of the year. These two are absolute monsters. They're going to have a huge slugfest. And they're the number 6 and number 10 ranked featherweight in the world. There's so many people ahead of them. There's so many people that are going to get in between Volkanovski and Holloway, and I think that's why we're not going to see one, at least for a while. And Dana White's rule anyway is if you fight twice and you lose both of them, we're not going to see a third one, pretty much no matter how close it is, because you've lost. At the end of the day, you lost twice. There's no point in seeing a third fight. There might be a special case. This might be a special case, but I think we're not going to see these two fight for at least another year or two.
I could see it happening, and even if Volkanovski doesn't retain the title, I think these two could end up fighting again. Just to
it's possible, but
Just settle it.
there are other contenders in this division that are they're ready and their time is due. They need to be given the opportunity. We're looking at the Korean monster, the Korean zombie. We're looking at Zabit. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. Also out of Dagestan, who is undefeated in his MMA career, and once he does get the championship, he's going to hold on to it. Zabit is one of the best featherweights currently, and the list goes on and on. There's so many featherweights, so there's a lot of competition that Volkanovski has to handle and Max Holloway has to go through in order to get back to the top. So there's a lot to work through, and it's going to take some time. These things just don't happen overnight. These fighters, they just want 5 full rounds. They got to recover, and they got to figure out what's next. Right now it's they're still recovering, so it's going to be some time. But I think that we moving on to the main event, Jorge Masvidal versus Kamaru Usman. This is the fight that was the draw for a lot of people, but I will say again that I called this fight exactly how it was going to be, and I told everybody this is going to be a boring fight. This is not going to be fun to watch. If you're not a fan of the UFC or MMA, if you are a casual fan, then this is not for you. You don't buy this if it's not for you. And what I don't understand is when people got the result, they were pissed. They were like, oh my God, this is boring. He's foot stomping. He's holding him up against the cage. This is stupid. If you're paying $65 to watch a fight, understand what you're buying. Understand what you're paying for. That's not, that's a good amount of money to most people. So understand what you're paying for before you do it. And you won't waste your money. If anybody saw these two, if you've ever seen Kamaru Usman fight before, this is pretty much the result you're going to get, unless you're looking at Colby Covington, last December where they got into a huge striking match. That's not what Kamaru Usman's going to do, especially if you look at what happened. These two just learned 6 days ago that they're fighting each other. So Kamaru Usman didn't really prepare for Jorge Masvidal. He's going to go back to his wrestling. He's one of the best wrestlers in the sport. He's going to use his wrestling to his advantage, where Jorge Masvidal isn't as strong. He's going to try to strike with him. That's just his background. And so it's the exact result we got was Kamaru Usman just working him up against the cage, taking him down. And that was the entire thing. Now, we did see some positives from Jorge Masvidal. We saw him stuff most of the takedown attempts by Kamaru Usman. We saw that maybe he actually was training more than a lot of people thought he was. Because even Dustin Poirier, who is there at American Top Team with him, said that there were high level wrestlers coming in to spar with Jorge Masvidal months ago, before this was ever a thing. Because right after Jorge Masvidal beat Nate Diaz last December, this was the talk. Everybody thought this was going to be the next fight, and then Jorge Masvidal couldn't come to an agreement with the UFC on a contract, and so they moved on from him. But in that meantime, Jorge Masvidal knew that Kamaru Usman was right around the corner, so he's going to start getting ready for him now. So he had an idea of what to do, and had a good amount of practice learning how to combat the wrestling of Kamaru Usman. So this was going to be no matter what, it was going to be a boring fight, as most people want to call it, because they still didn't understand each other. They didn't know each other, and they didn't have much time to really train for each other.
Yeah, so, I'm gonna just jump in. I watched all these fights, and I thought most of them were great. This was the one I didn't, and I listened to you, and I heard that you said that it was going to be a boring fight, and that's exactly what it was. And I understand people. I mean, think about it this way. This is how I think about it. We think of Floyd Mayweather as one of the best pound-for-pound boxers in boxing history, right?
Yeah.
he was not entertaining at all to watch in the ring. All he did was duck, dodge, and dive away from punches. He won on technical points, and that was his strategy. He was not fun to watch at all. Outside the ring, leading up to everything, he was great. Just like Usman, he knows how to market himself. He knows how to put on a show outside of the octagon. But when it came time to actually, put on a show inside, he just did exactly what he needed to retain the title. And I think that's what people don't understand, and that's what people aren't like truly getting, is that you're watching somebody who understands the fundamentals of the fight and how to win, and that's what you want. And I understand that you're looking at 2 o'clock in the morning after watching, and I mean, look at the fights that we just talked about. The Hebos fight started it all off. Then the actual street fight between Namajunas and Andrade, the Jan Aldo fight that went almost the distance but ended with a TKO, and then the controversy of the Volkanovski Holloway fight, which was absolutely incredible to watch. You're so pumped up, your adrenaline is going, and to have this be the end of the night, this is where everybody finishes. I think that's where you're seeing a lot more letdown right now, because everybody was building up this incredible adrenaline for the fight, and it, like, we knew going in that this was going to be what it was, and it lived up to exactly how you said. I think when you talk about people knowing what they buy, that's fair, but at the same time, they got their money's worth with every other single fight that was on the card. So it's not just, they're not just buying one fight, they're buying the entire card. And for me to say that this was a boring fight, I think is true. I think it was very boring. It was tough to watch, in all honesty. I don't want to watch 75 foot strikes. I just don't. But I wanted to see the whole card, and I got to see the whole card, and I think overall it was a great card, and I would watch it again if I had the opportunity. But to say that this wasn't a boring fight, or that people need to refocus their energy on something else, is, I think that's a bit overstepping.
Yeah, I mean, you as a consumer, you have to take into consideration everything you're getting. But when they got Jorge Masvidal to agree to this fight, they pretty much added 400,000 new viewers to this event. That people were just gonna watch to see Jorge Masvidal, because they know that he is a very electric fighter, very exciting to watch. And you if you knew anything, if you read any headlines or did any research on your own, you would realize that these guys are struggling to even make weight. They're struggling to get ready for this fight. They're halfway across the world in Abu Dhabi fighting at 9 a.m. in the morning. There's a lot of odds stacked against both of them, and so there's with all of that, they're gonna just go back to their roots and what their strengths are. And Kamaru Usman had the upper hand in that, because he's able to just lock up with you, take you down to the ground, and hold you there, hold you up against the fence. That's where he thrives, and Jorge Masvidal is at a disadvantage, and so that's why we saw the result. But I guarantee you, when we see this fight again, and Jorge Masvidal is asking for an immediate rematch, when this happens again, this is going to be an amazing fight. This is going to be exciting. But if these two have a full camp to get to know each other, and they just spent 25 minutes in the ring together, so they already have a good idea. Jorge Masvidal has been thinking of all different scenarios of how he could have done better, and I'm sure Kamaru's doing the same. These two are going to be extremely prepared for each other, and I expect to finish, an early finish in the next fight. I think it's going to be a jam-packed 10 minutes of fighting. That's going to end in either a knockout or a submission, but you're going to get your money's worth in the next fight. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, I think Masvidal, I mean, like you said, he's an incredibly electric fighter. He's somebody that people know and understand that they're going to get their money's worth when they pay to watch him fight. I think Usman was a big unknown for the casual fan coming into all of this, right? Most people haven't paid attention to Kamaru Usman coming into this, and I can speak from experience is that, when you don't know exactly what you're getting, um, it can obviously be a letdown because you expected something from Masvidal and you didn't get it. Well, it's hard to say that you didn't get it because he only had 6 days to prepare. Usman only had 8 days to prepare, knowing that he was going to have a fight still that they were working on, either Masvidal or I think there was somebody else that was in play at the time. Um, so there were still negotiations. Both of them had to lose weight to make weight.
Yeah, I mean, I told
And,
you yesterday that I talked about this last week where, once Kamaru Usman learned that Gilbert Burns tested positive for COVID, he went out to a buffet and ate a bunch of food. He put on 8 pounds in one night. Like, that's ridiculous. Now I know, there's a lot of water weight there, but still, how much food are you consuming that you put on 8 pounds in a single meal? That's just ridiculous.
hey
That
man, some of these fighters, they know how to eat. They probably learned from Tim the Tap Man or something like that. But honestly, when you think about it, you know, both of them, they were a little caught off guard because Gilbert Burns is not Jorge Masvidal. They're different fighters. They have different tactics. They're just different people. When you're in the octagon with somebody and you were expecting somebody else, just physically looking at somebody else can already be a mind fuck for you. So at this point, you need to truly understand that, like, all right, now I have to go with what I know is going to get the job done. And Usman, who had been in camp, he was more physically prepared for this fight to happen more than Jorge Masvidal was. At this point, he just stuck with what he knew. I think, if, like you said, if we get a rematch of this, and we should, Jorge Masvidal is blowing up our Twitter timeline right now, demanding an immediate rematch. I think that at this point we are going to we'll see a much better fight moving forward.
Oh, 100%. And this is something that's gonna take a while. Gilbert Burns clearly deserves to get the next fight. He was right in line to get this one. So it's only right that he gets it. He gets the next shot. But right after that, Jorge Masvidal is knocking on the door. And in the interim, there is talks that we might get Jorge Masvidal versus Conor McGregor, which would be unreal. Just, oh my God, it gives me
I
chills
think that
thinking
would be
about it.
great, but Masvidal, it seems like he's pretty set on wanting to go back after Usman. And I don't know if he's willing to accept anything less than that at this point.
Well, we are, he just got a huge new contract with the UFC. I can't imagine how many casual fans would tune in to see these two fight. They said 400,000 people, bought the pay-per-view just to watch Masvidal. There's millions that'll watch the fight to watch Conor McGregor, and you put the two together. I'll pay $200 to watch that fight. Like, just name a price, I'll pay it because I want to see that happen.
Yeah, that would be an incredible fight, and I'd love to see something like that. I love watching McGregor fight, and I love like we both said, Masvidal is very electric in the octagon, and I think that would provide for some extremely good content. I mean, Conor took no damage in his last fight with Cowboy Cerrone. I mean, his shoulder took most of the damage with Cerrone's face on it, but other than that, it was pretty simple, and I think they'd both be ready to go. It would just be a matter of time, or a matter of Masvidal waning on his demand for an immediate rematch with Usman to take on such a fight like that. And if that were to happen, I see that happening somewhere toward the end of the year, maybe a December or January fight. I think that if no matter what, that's where Masvidal will be fighting next, is somewhere in that area.
Yeah, I mean, just simply put, the UFC needs to put this together. This has to happen. The thought is already in our heads, and now we want to see it. So let's do it.
All right. That was everything that we saw from Fight Island. It was incredible. Nick talked about the Calvin Kattar, Dan Ige fight that's going to be happening tomorrow night. We're talking about Wednesday, July 15th. Nick, tell everybody where they can see this fight.
You can watch this fight on ESPN Plus. It's a free fight. Fight nights are always free, so as long as you have ESPN Plus, it costs $4.99. If you don't have it, use the free trial. This is a fight you're going to want to watch because Dan Ige is an up-and-comer. Calvin Kattar is part of the New England Mafia. He is an absolute brawler. If you want to, get hyped up for his fight, watch his fight versus Jeremy Stephens. That was an amazing fight. Yeah, you won't be disappointed. It's 15 minutes of absolute domination or absolute war. So that'll hype you up, and this one I guarantee is going to deliver.
Perfect. We'll be looking forward to that, and we might be able to talk about that next week. But I do want to switch topics at this point. I want to move forward, and one thing that has recently come to light is that Rajon Rondo broke his thumb for the Los Angeles Lakers in practice. So the Lakers are now down both of their starting guards. Avery Bradley chose not to participate in the restart, and now Rajon Rondo is out with the broken thumb, looking at possibly coming back during the conference series, should the Lakers make it that far at this point. Do you think that the Lakers are still viewed as co-favorites with the Clippers to come out of the West?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know anymore. You lost Avery Bradley and you added J.R. Smith. All right, it's still down. Avery Bradley is better than J.R. Smith. You're losing a huge defensive weapon, but now you lose your facilitator and one of the best point guard facilitators in the sport. In the NBA. He works perfectly with AD and LeBron, and I don't know who's gonna be able to fill his shoes. They're 15, 16 days away from restarting the NBA. That's not a lot of time. I don't know if there's any free agents that they can go after that are similar to Rondo, or what they're gonna do if they're just gonna ride with what they have.
But I would say that the Nets took most of the free agents because half their team is coming back to play. Yeah. So I mean, the Lakers are kind of screwed in that sense. But continue.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that the Clippers are now getting the edge on them. It's going to be tough for the Lakers to do much now that the 1-2 are gone. Now I'm not counting them out, not even in the slightest, because it's LeBron and Anthony Davis. As long as those two are there, they're going to have a shot. LeBron, we saw what LeBron did, with the Cavaliers. He single-handedly brought a championship home to Cleveland. And
Irving had something to do with that, but continue.
Yeah, but, Anthony Davis is also there. I don't think they're going to have too many issues getting to the conference finals. I still think it's going to be Clippers-Lakers conference finals. So I don't think there's any change in there, but it's definitely going to be a little bit harder for the Lakers to come away and move on to the finals without Rajon Rondo and Avery Bradley.
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers, they sit at the 1 seed right now, but you have teams like the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Jazz, the Thunder, the Rockets. I mean, all these teams are coming back healthy, and I mean, besides Russell Westbrook, who I think is in quarantine at this point, but I believe the biggest issue with the Lakers going into this season, this restart, everything, was the fact that they didn't have the depth that a team like the Clippers did. And at this point, that depth is starting to wane. The lack of depth is starting to show because they don't have anybody to replace Rondo. They had to go out and sign J.R. Smith to replace Avery Bradley. You're going to focus on LeBron James and Anthony Davis to really hold up their end of the deal, but now they're going to have to do it on both ends of the court. I mean, Rondo was a great facilitator, but he was also an incredible defender. I mean, he was just a nuisance for your team, and now you don't have that guy on your team. It's going to be a struggle.
Yeah.
I think the Lakers are missing a huge piece at this point, and I actually don't see them making it out of the West if Rajon Rondo doesn't come back until the conference uh, to the conference playoffs, because at that point, I don't think that they have the strength and the depth to be able to contend with some of these other teams that truly have everything put together. You look at the Utah Jazz, and you have Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell and those boys out in Utah, and the Chris Paul and the Thunder doing their thing. Obviously Westbrook and Harden in Houston. There's a lot of different ways that the Lakers could find themselves out of it, and not to say that Rajon Rondo was this major breaking point for the Lakers, but when you're chipping away at the possible depth that they have and the possible players they can throw out on the court, I just don't understand where they're going to start getting these pieces that are going to be able to contend with the likes of what other teams can throw out there at the 1 and 2 spot.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be tough. And I had the Lakers Bucks in the finals. I may be more inclined. I will want to see how the Lakers do at the beginning of the restart to get a feel for them. But I may be leaning more towards the Clippers being able to get past them in the conference finals, and it's gonna be a true challenge for LeBron now. The road to the finals is much harder, and I'm still kind of pulling for the Lakers a little bit in the back of my mind, because I would love to see the Lakers win it, do it for Kobe, and I still have that sentiment, but there's a huge challenge in front of them, and it's going to be a hard one to overcome.
For sure. And when you're talking about the Clippers, they still have their guys, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George,
Patrick Beverly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick Beverly is the Rajon Rondo equivalent, and the Clippers have their guy, and the Lakers don't. That could end up becoming the major issue that they have to overcome. But we'll see at that point where things are and how things are going. But right now, it's not looking great for the Lakers, and there's a couple other teams that are starting to get a little worried about their depth and players who aren't playing. But it should be exciting. I'm looking forward to the restart. It's right around the corner, just a couple weeks away at this point, and I'm very excited to be able to start moving forward with the NBA season. It should be noted, just as a side note, there was a report that came out today that somebody had been snitching on NBA players that were breaking out of the quarantine, if you will, that were they were walking around outside, and somebody was making calls, and a lot of players have anonymously come out and said they believe it to be Chris Paul at this point. So I'm wondering if A, that's the case, but B, if that's going to lead to some backlash against Chris Paul and the Thunder, and what that means for everybody moving forward. So we'll see. That's going to be a storyline for everybody to start watching, but it very interesting moving forward with the next couple of weeks before we get started again. All right, so I think that's going to wrap it up for the NBA. There was some pretty big news that happened over the weekend, and big as in significancy, not as breaking. And that would be that the Washington Redskins will no longer be referred to as the Redskins, which they have been since 1932. So owner Daniel Snyder has said that they're changing their name in accordance with the sentiment that has gone on throughout the year, and to be a little more respectful of the Native Americans, and basically, they've been calling for this for years, and where our country is and where society is at this point, Daniel Snyder has caved in on his stance and will be renaming the team. Now, that's the news. Here's the fun part. Now we get to decide what the team name is. So, Nick, I want to hear from you first. What do you believe that the Redskins should now become? What do you think the new name is?
So I heard this name a few days ago, and it's definitely stuck in my head. and I think I would love to see this. The Washington Red Wolves. And I can just picture it when they are scoring touchdowns, everybody's howling, "Ow!" That would be just awesome. I would love to be in Washington at the FedEx Stadium or whatever it's called, just there, in that celebration, because that would be an electric atmosphere. Everybody has their thing. You've got the chant in Minnesota. You've got the skull. You've got the beating of the drum and the chant in Kansas City. Everybody's got their thing, and I think that would be so cool to watch. I think that's something that would be a lot of fun in Washington, and that's the name that I've been looking forward to, and I could definitely get behind.
Yeah, I like that. I actually haven't heard of that one before, but I like that you talked about howling if they score a touchdown. I don't think they'd be doing much howling down in Washington with the team that they're throwing out there. But in all seriousness, I think the Red Wolves would be an incredible name. I think they would liven up the naming a little bit. I mean, I'm tired of the same old, but if I were to go with something, I believe that the Washington Senators just sounds right. It plays on, the fact that obviously DC is home to, America's politicians, and the Senators are right there in DC. Also, the fact that the Senators can represent so many different things as far as society goes, and the NHL has a Senators as well. So I think the Senators works on multiple levels, but it's not as exciting as the Red Wolves. That's for sure. I just think it's very fitting. It doesn't. There's no divide with that name. Nobody's ever going to get upset with the Senators. I think it's the safe play, if you will.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how they're going to do this. I see names every day of what this could be. There are endless possibilities of what this could be. And I think they're going to continue to use their burgundy or maroon and gold colors. I don't know exactly what they are. So I think they're going to keep that color scheme. And so I think they need to find something to fit that. I've seen a lot of people come up with nicknames that start with red. So red something, red tails, red wolves. I think it might be something of that sort to fit the color scheme. But it's going to be pretty interesting. And I wonder if they're just going to choose a name, or if they want it to have some type of a background to it, some type of a story that fits it, why they chose that name. It's just not random. Something to give them a history before they even start using it.
I mean, knowing Daniel Snyder, I'm sure they'll be called the Washington Snyders at some point. So
I'm sure he's floated that idea.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's very interesting. It's a cool story to watch. I've been somebody who said that the Redskins should change their name for years now. I just just the way the country was going, and the fact that the Redskins has kind of it has a negative connotation to it, and I think at this point that's where I think that's where I draw the line right there. But one thing that we need to watch out for, and I truly am saddened by this, but people are starting to call out that the Kansas City Chiefs need to think about changing their name, that the Dallas Cowboys need to start thinking about changing their name. And they've started to list off a lot of different teams. Somebody even suggested that the New York Yankees start thinking about renaming their team because it brings us back to a time where the country was divided. I think that we need to kind of slow ourselves a little bit on the renaming. We had to look at this one specific instance, which was basically a racial slur toward Native Americans, and isolate this incident as this is a one-team thing. Native Americans do not find the Chiefs racist. They do not find that to be any sort of negative connotation toward their people. In fact, a lot of, from what I've seen in interviews, Native Americans actually like that because they think that's more playing homage to them, especially being from the Midwest in Kansas City. That's where a lot of tribes were. That's what it is. It's paying homage to the Native American tribes out there. So I think that we need to kind of slow our roll when we're talking about renaming multiple teams. But we'll see how this one goes, and I'm excited to move forward with the Washington franchise, and hopefully Nike will put them back in their stores.
Yeah.
And then I think this is the last bit of news we had. We had a couple signings that happened just today. The Chiefs signed defensive tackle Chris Jones, Pro Bowler. They just signed him to a 4-year, $85 million deal to get him off the franchise tag with $60 million guaranteed. This money, I mean, essentially, they locked up their star defensive player after locking up Mahomes. They're using the flexibility that Mahomes gave them because he spread out his money over 12 years. They're using that flexibility to basically say that we're going to try to keep the core players intact at this point. And so I'll be interested to see how this works. I know we gave our assessment on Patrick Mahomes' contract last week, that we don't expect him to live out the full extent of the contract. I think it's very interesting that Chris Jones' contract is only 4 years, which is what I projected Mahomes' contract to be, even though it starts to take place in 2 years from now. So I think they're gonna ride out Chris Jones, and then after this contract, he might be hit free agency at that point, depending on his output. But what'd you think of the Chris Jones news, Nick?
Yeah, I think this was pretty inevitable. Once we got the conclusion of Patrick Mahomes, that was behind us. Now the Chiefs could focus all their attention on Chris Jones. He was, and like you brought up, he was talking with Le'Veon Bell on, hey, how do I handle this situation? And Le'Veon was like, hold out, don't give in. And that's exactly what he was doing. He was ready to sit out as long as he had to get what he thought he was due. And that's exactly, it worked out in his favor. The Chiefs, they caved in to what he wanted, and he got a bigger deal than I thought he would have gotten. I think the contract was a little rich for my blood. Chris Jones is an amazing defensive end, but is he Khalil Mack? No, he's not. He's not. He is not giving that output that I would want to. What is that? $21.5 million a year on average. That's a lot of money. That's you're paying.
His base salary is 20 per year. He's got $5 million in total incentives, and there was a couple other things put in there. But yeah,
I mean, if you look at the numbers, I haven't actually taken a deep dive into the numbers yet. But I just don't think he's a top 3 defensive end in the NFL. I don't think that he's worth that money. And he maybe he'll prove it. But I just don't see it. I think that was a little rich. I think they could have worked out a better deal, but I think they just wanted to make sure that they have all their pieces, that no one's holding out, that they could just move on with their training camp, their mini camps, whatever's going on right now, so that they could start working towards another championship next season.
For sure. And it looks like the Browns are closing in on another deal. This one with Pro Bowl defensive end Myles Garrett. As long as he doesn't swing his helmet at more quarterback heads, he will receive 5 years, $125 million. This per Adam Schefter. A steep price to pay, but Myles Garrett, a top 5 defensive end in the league, in my opinion. Nick, what are your thoughts on this deal possibly going through?
Now, I understand paying Myles Garrett because he is a top 5 defensive end in the league.
Mm-hmm.
But $25 million on average a year? That is crazy. That is what Tom Brady is getting paid this year. That is what Drew Brees is getting paid this year. That is just ridiculous. Now we're getting back into quarterback money for defensive ends. And I know they're the second most valuable position in the sport. But, man, that is just crazy. What happens if Chase Young is as dominant as we think he's going to be? Is he getting $30 million a year at the end of his contract?
I mean, you have to take into account where the salary cap's going to be at that point in time.
It's
So it's very
and
possible that Chase Young might be the first $30 million a year defensive end. But we still, I mean, you look at the defensive end market, you still have players like Jadeveon Clowney and Everson Griffin still out on the open market. So I mean, the defensive end market, while it's, these guys are getting paid, the fact remains that some of them, even though they have the output of great players, that they have a short shelf life, and teams aren't willing to pay top dollar all the time. The Houston Texans were willing to trade him on their franchise tag. The Seahawks aren't willing to give Clowney exactly what he wanted. They moved on from him, signed other people. You know, this is a sign that, as rich as these deals are, it's not going to last forever, and it's not for everyone as well. So it looks like only the top players are getting the top dollar, and everybody else is going to have to fight for the rest.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially with the cap going up, to see what happens. But Chris Jones and Myles Garrett getting these new contracts back to back like this, it's setting the stage for all these young defensive ends. And if I was a youngster and I was getting into the sport, I'd want to play defensive end, because you're not going to get hit as a quarterback, and you get to do the hitting. You get to chase down the quarterback, which I think is a lot more fun. And you're getting paid just about the same amount of money. So congrats to both these guys. I think the Myles Garrett deal will go through. This is it's good. I think the contract for Myles Garrett might be a little bit long, 5 years. Anything can happen in 5 years. He'll probably be 30 years old by the time that deal is done. But I'm sure he'll live up to it. Myles Garrett, if you look at him, he is an absolute freak, scary guy. I'd be intimidated by him. I'm sure a lot of offensive tackles are, and that's why he does so well. So, once you pay him, I'm sure he'll show up for you.
For sure. And just one more bit of NFL news. Jason Peters re-signed with the Philadelphia Eagles today. They signed him not to play tackle, which is what he played most of his career, or all of his career, but to play guard to replace the injured Brandon Brooks, who tore his Achilles earlier in the offseason, will not be able to play the rest of the season, or at all this season. An interesting move, bringing back the known veteran back onto the Eagles. Nick, what did you think about Jason Peters signing with the Eagles?
That doesn't make any sense to me. You're taking a guy who's played 10 plus years at one position and putting him at a completely different position, and you want him to fill in for a Pro Bowler. That you're not gonna. Jason Peters struggled to stay healthy last season, and you want him to go fill in at a brand new position. Playing right guard is not playing left tackle. It's very different technique. It's different stance. It's the footwork is completely different.
Right.
I just don't see this working out. I don't know, unless Jason Peters showed them something that they're excited about, that they think will work. I don't understand this at all. This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting move for sure. The Eagles, I think they're in a bit of a bind. I know that they have tried to contact the Patriots about a trade for Joe Thuney in the recent months. I'm assuming nothing came out of that conversation based on the move that they made today to replace Brooks with Jason Peters. So it'll be interesting. I thought Jason Peters would hold out a little bit, because if there's an injury in camp, or in the preseason or something along those lines, I feel like he could have filled in nicely. That leaves the top remaining offensive tackle is DeMar Dotson, who was a right tackle his entire career. So we'll be interested to see exactly how that's going to make its way throughout the rest of the off season and going into the regular season. But I believe that's all we have for this week's episode. That was the last bit of news that we had. We appreciate all you guys coming out to listen. Make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to like the video if you liked what all the artwork that Nick did for us. It looks incredible. He spent a lot of time working on it, so show him some love. Throw a like on it, and we will see you next week. Take care, guys.